الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. We continue on Sunday, August the 26th, 709, according with the Gregorian calendar, which coincides exactly with the 14th of the Hijjah. After the performance of Hajj of this year, 1439, the Hijrah of Mustafa alayhi salatu wasalam. We continue in the chapter, this tremendous chapter, which is entitled From Polytheism is to Seek Istighatha with other than Allah or to invoke other than Allah. Before we actually continue in the book, I want to read a little bit of what the great Imam Sheikh Abdurrahman ibn Hassan Ali Sheikh, who's the author of Fath al-Majid, what he said in this regard, which is very beneficial, which I think we can contribute to clarification of this particular matter. As he says in Fath al-Majid, rahimahullah, he talked about, and he quoted from the scholars of the past, his name was Sun'ullah al-Hanafi. Sun'ullah al-Hanafi. And that you'll find that he brings scholars who are from the heads, Sheikh Abdurrahman Hassan Ali Sheikh. He brings heads from every madhab of who they respect and who they revere from their scholars and what was their belief system, of who they were, their own well-respected from their own madhahib. And you'll find that he uses them in order to what? In order to use them as an argument or proof against their own followers who oppose them in their belief system, which their heads was upon was correct, but their followers deviated from that and started believing and actually indulging in matters that's totally in opposition to what the scholar that they revered was upon. So that's what you'll find even from the author, not exactly Sheikh Muhammad Abdul Wahab, but the one who explained this book, who is from his relatives, Sheikh Abdurrahman bin Hassan Ali Sheikh, who's the one who explained Fath al-Majid, which is an explanation of Kitaab At-Tawheed, another explanation. He used a scholar from the Hanafi madhab. His name was Sun'ullah al-Hanafi. And he was from their scholars and their heads that they revere and they respect. And he brought their speech in this chapter of Al-Istighatha, of about pertaining to the ibadah, which is called Istighatha. And he said about that, he said, because of course we know that some of the Muslims that believe that the dead, or from those who are from the awliya, or those who are close to Allah. And keep in mind what we mentioned last class, we said that the people who started grave worshiping of the dead, or that they can conduct in this existence like Allah, of allowing certain things to happen of good and evil, or creating or sustaining, or forgiving sins, or conducting this in this existence, just as Allah Ta'ala administrates the affairs of the creation. They also likewise take those people who are either from those living or from those dead, and say that that's exactly what they can do. What Allah can do, they can do it too. So he refutes this notion, Sun'ullah al-Hanafi, rahimahullah. As he says in his book, he said, في الرد على من ادعى للأولياء تصرفات أن للأولياء تصرفات في الحياة وبعد الممات على سبيل الكرامة. He said, in his refutation against those who claim that the awliya, those who are close to Allah, conduct, or they have some type of matters where they conduct in life and after death, in a manner which they consider what is called karama. Karama. And inshallah, if we have some time, and if we was to go into Al-Aqidat al-Wasitiyah, you'll find that there's a chapter covering the aspect of what they call karamat. Karamat al-Awliya. Shaykh al-Islam has a chapter in that in his book called Al-Aqidat al-Wasitiyah. And he talked about the difference between what's considered a miracle and what's considered a karama. A karama, just to sum it up, everyone, is something that's legislated where karamat happens at the hands of those, or Allah allows to happen at the hands of those who are truly righteous. Affairs in which, of course, that goes against what we're acclimated to seeing. For example, what took place with some of the tabi'een, where they walked on top of water and they crossed the ocean where they didn't need a boat, for example. Or certain affairs that took place at the hands of the righteous, from Abu Idris al-Khawlani, and Usayd ibn Hudayr, and some of the Sahaba likewise. Certain things that went against the norm. As we know, miracles happen at the hands of the prophets. So they call them ayat, as we talked about before. What happens at the hands of the prophets are ayat. Even though some of the Ahl Ilm use the word mu'jizat. Mu'jizat, even though you'll find the great Imam, Sheikh Muhammad Aman Jami, says, even though the word mu'jiza is something that's commonly used to say that that's called a miracle, he said, but what is better is that the people stick to what Allah had called those affairs, which is ayat. Meaning what Allah allows to happen at the hands of the prophets or the messengers to confirm their veracity and truthfulness of what? Of them being prophets and messengers. However, for those who are not prophets and messengers, from the righteous, who are truly from the awliya of Allah, what happens at their hands, certain things did happen. Feeding at the hands of the Sahaba. Of some of them, you'll find in some of the narrations where some of the Sahaba were in very dark places, and by the fadl of Allah and His bounty and His blessing, allow. In one narration it says their stick lighted up, just automatically, just like they didn't light it, didn't take a lighter or nothing. It just lit up and it guided them back to where they were. It guided them back to their destination. You'll find narrations, or even some narrations said that their finger lit up. These type of things, do we call them miracles? No. Why? Because they're not prophets or messengers. But they call them karamat. Karamat al-awliya. Karamat. That's not what I'm speaking about today. It's just a side benefit. But karamat al-awliya, they have their conditions, of course. And still to this day, us as the Muslims, we still believe that karamat can take place. No doubt. We affirm that. Even Shaykh al-Islam put a whole chapter in this, in that tremendous treatise entitled Al-Aqidat al-Wasitiyah. It's in there. And he gives the conditions, and we have a lot of ulama who explain it, giving the conditions of karamat. From them, karamat does happen at the hands of those who are righteous. It can take place. And we still affirm it to this day. We don't say that it's over. As long as there are people who are upon monotheism and who are upon the correct aqidah, these are the conditions we're mentioning now. A person that's upon the correct belief, the belief of Tawheed, without there being any type of discrepancy in their conviction of certain types of inhirafat, of deviation in their belief systems, such as, for example, them believing that Allah is everywhere. They're not from the awliya of Allah. Or, for example, people who say that Allah doesn't exist, or Allah is not above the heavens, or Allah does not have characteristics. These are the people of Ahl Bid'ah. So we don't say that they're truly awliya of Allah, in which karamat can take place at their hands. Rather, you'll find, like we said, of those who are from the one who is deserving of having the karamat are Ahl Sunnah, and Ahl Hadith, and Ahl Tawheed, because they are the true awliya of Allah. Which, if karamat was to happen, then they're the ones that deserve that it would take place at their hands, not the people who are upon deviation. So that's the thing that Sun'ullah al-Hanafi is establishing here. Because you'll find those who are upon deviated methodology saying that, see, our mashayikh have karamat. But they're not karamat. Rather, they're fitan. Rather, they're fitan in order to deceive the people. Despite of them calling them awliya, meaning those from the Sufi and those who are worshipping graves, and those who are upon those affairs that anger Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they're not considered awliya, and these are not karamat. And this is what Sun'ullah al-Hanafi is mentioning here. Because what he says, this is what he says. He says that those who claim from the awliya, in which he's saying that they claim that they're awliya, that they can conduct in this existence like Allah, in life and after death. in a manner which is considered a karama. So it's clear what I'm saying so far? Which is a manner where they consider it a karama. But we talked about the people of falsehood. It is not, rather is totally far off that karama will happen at their hands. Of those who are from the enemies of Allah and those who are upon falsehood, especially those who have deviation in their belief system. Of all different types of discrepancies, aqadiyah, as far as in their conviction and their creed. But all those discrepancies will alleviate them and remove them from being from those who are awliya, who Allah will allow to have at their hands or happen at their hands, those karamat. That's the reason why Imam al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah, Muhammad bin Idris al-Qurashi, al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah, made a poetry where he says, إذا رأيت الرجل يطير فوق ماء البحر يسير ولم يقف عند حدود الشرع فاعلم أنه مستدرج بدعي. He says, you see a man that him floating above water. He said, إذا رأيت الرجل يطير, excuse me, if you see a man flying in the air and you see him walking above water and he did not stop at the boundaries of what Allah has set, meaning the proper aqeedah, the proper methodology, him staying away from sin, true person who's righteous. He didn't stop at the boundaries of Allah. Know that he's a person that Allah is setting up for a trap, and he's upon bid'ah. So he's not from the awliya of Allah. Even though the Sufiya call these people awliya, you'll find them that they are from the most wicked people. Those who make dua to other than Allah, who worship graves, and allow people to worship them, whom they're so-called mystic mashayikh. So anyway, Sun'ullah al-Hanafi he said there's now manifested between the Muslims different groups, and they claim that they possess awliya. And those so-called awliya can conduct in this existence and have the same abilities as Allah of conducting in people's lives. And likewise, they can conduct in this existence either during the time of their life and after their death. And likewise, people seek istighatha with them. They make dua to them during the times of adversity, as we mentioned. He says, during times of hardships and difficulties. And that these so-called people, or awliya, or their so-called mashayikh, can remove these matters, or whatever affair or difficulty or hardship or time of adversity that they're facing in their lives, they can remove it. So they come to their graves and they call them out in order for them to take care of their necessities, using it as an evidence and proof that these are considered karamat. Is it clear what I'm saying so far, everyone? He says, so these are considered karamat. Qalu, and then they give them certain names. They call them, for example, Abdal, or Nuqaba, or Nujaba. Just names. These so-called mystic, mashayikh, so-called, that they have different names that they give them. And it's crazy because these names are just as what happened during the time of the Greeks, where they had specific deities and gods for different jobs. That one is for love. That one is for example, for war. There's a god of war, or there's a god of love, or that one is for the sea, or that one's for the rain. As we know that the Greeks were heavily into polytheism, right? Similar to that, likewise, the Sufiya have different names for different mashayikh. That so-called, that one can give you happiness. That one can give you sadness. That one can remove sadness. That one will give you love. Or that one can remove that one. So now they give us specific names. Or that one's for fertility, or what have you. If you want your white woman to be pregnant, go to that specific show called Wali and ask him. Is it clear what I'm saying so far, everyone? So they give them different names like Abdal and Nuqaba wa Awtad wa Nujaba wa Sab'un wa Sab'a wa Arba'un wa Arba'a, or 40, 50, or 44, or 50, whatever. They give them different names. All of them is to accomplish that goal, which is called to seek istighatha or ghawth, their relief, to remove these affairs or these difficulties and these different types of affairs what are considered adversity that people face. And says on top of that, they also declare permissible of slaughtering for these people who are so-called mashayikh that are living, and after their death, slaughtering for them, and also performing and taking oaths for them. And they affirm for them that they also can give reward. They can give reward based upon what the people do. قالوا, of course you see of what is in, where now they have went to either to one side of the opposite extreme, either too lax or they what? Or they went to the extreme as far as these people. And in this, he said, this type of conduct behavior, he says, is everlasting destruction and everlasting punishment for the one who dies upon it. He said, because in this type of matter is absolute, carried out, if you want to say, or actualized polytheism, with no doubt. That's totally contradictive and in opposition to the Kitaab al-Aziz, al-Musaddaq. And also opposing the aqa'id of those who are true scholars. So this is what Sun'ullah al-Hanafi. Why does Shaykh Abdul Rahman ibn Hassan Ali Shaykh mention this? Because he brings the aqwal, the statements from the madhahib of those who went astray. Because you'll find that a lot of those who are upon the deviation, or for example, the aqeedah of the Sha'ira in the Muslim world, they claim that they so-called upon the madhab al-Hanafi. A lot of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Especially in the countries like, for example, today, such as Turkey. You'll find that they so-called claim that they're Ahnaf. That they ascribe themselves to the madhab al-Hanafi. Especially those who are from Turkey. And a lot of those in those particular areas. So, but despite of that, you'll find, like we said, Allah Ta'ala refused this. When Allah Ta'ala puts in His book, for example, that to Allah belongs the heavens and the earth. When you hear those ayat, that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belongs to Him, mulku samawati wal ard. When Allah Ta'ala clearly affirms for Himself that He's the owner and the one who totally dominates and who is full in His full domination, the ownership of the heavens and the earth. That refutes any type of notion or belief that someone can conduct in this existence and have the same capability of changing the direction of one's life, how Allah Ta'ala does with the creation. When you hear those ayat, that for Allah belongs the heavens and the earth, one of the beliefs that should come to one's mind is that there's no one in this existence that can what? That can remove or have some type of conduct or administrate the affairs of the creation, how Allah Ta'ala conducts. No one from the human being can do that. When Allah Ta'ala says these ayats, that's a direct refutation against that type of belief. Is it clear what I'm saying so far, everyone? Even in so many different ayat, it's too many to be numbered. I'm sure everyone has heard recitation of Quran, وَلِلَّهِ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. I'm sure everyone has heard that in so many different ayats when they in Tawheed or when they hear recitation. When you hear those ayats, that's a direct refutation against those who possess or have these type of ideologies. Or has these type of what? False, corrupt beliefs and ideologies. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refutes them when He lays down in His book these type of ayats and this type of clarification. Is it clear what I'm saying? For Allah ta'ala, He says, of course we know, وَلَا شَيْءَ لِغَيْرِهِ الآيات الدالة على أنه المنفرد بالخلق والتدبير والتصرف والتقدير. That Allah is the one who's singled out and He's alone in creation and administrating the affairs and conducting its existence and predetermining affairs and destining affairs. All of that. That is not for anyone except Him. Because everything is under His domination and under His possession, tabarak wa ta'ala, and His full ownership. Total domination and power. If He's the one that conducts in this existence, He's the one that's the total owner. He's the one that gives death, gives life, brings life out of death and death out of life to the end of it. And that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises Himself in so many ayat, showing that He's the one that's singled out by these matters. Subhanahu jalla fil ula. And so many different ayats from His book. As we don't have time to cover all the ayats, but just one ayat, for example. هَلْ مِنْ خَالِقٍ غَيْرَ اللَّهِ يَرْزُقُكُم مِنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. He says, is there, for example, a creator other than Allah that can give you sustenance from the heavens and the earth? Is there anyone other than Him can do that? For all these ayats refute all these different types of corrupt ideologies of what the deviant sects from the Muslims possess, especially those from the Sufiya and the Sufiya and those who are upon the ways also likewise the ways of the Rawafid, because like we talked about, they are the ones who are the founders of grave worshiping, in which they inherited from the Christians of those who used to worship likewise the dead from their righteous. As we know, likewise the Prophet ﷺ had made that clear. He says of those who used to take the qubur of the anbiya, or the graves of the prophets of their masajid, was first started by the Jews and the Christians. As the Prophet ﷺ had cursed them. Based upon that, because when that happened, that also caused the wrath and the curse of Allah to descend upon them. How about more for those Muslims who indulge inside of the same practices, what will happen to them if they was to do it? And this is the reason why, like we said, the Muslims are in the turmoil, or they're in this predicament that they're in of disgrace, and also likewise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's saghar and dhul, his humiliation, disgrace has been made because of them falling into these matters. The people are asked why we can't direct or so-called steer the Muslims in a different direction, because they did not rid themselves upon what's considered the most humiliating and most disgraceful sin that any human being could commit. So how much more can the people think that Allah is going to restore honor when you're committing the most filthiest, most erroneous, most uglified, vilified act that any human being could commit? If that's the case, how do you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to bring honor back to the Muslims if they not rid themselves of these matters? And this takes place, like we said, based upon Sun'ullah al-Hanafi that he mentions. And he says, likewise, Ibn al-Qayyim, and I'll mention this, I'm going to get back to the class, that Ibn al-Qayyim even mentioned a tremendous refutation against this. I even wrote some notes in it, where he said, he used the hadith of Ibn Adam. He said, قَطَعَ عَمَلُهُ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ. Because they say that what? That they can conduct after their death likewise. They can control certain affairs of people's lives individually. These so-called people, or so-called awliya, or so-called mashayikh that they say. They said, Ibn al-Qayyim brings a nice narration. He says, إِذَا مَاتَ ابْنُ آدَمَ انْقَطَعَ عَمَلُهُ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ الحديث فجميع ذلك وما هو نحوه دال على انقطاع الحس والحركة من الميت وأن أرواحهم ممسكة وأن أعمالهم منقطعة عن زيادة ونقصان فدل ذلك على أنه ليس للميت تصرف في ذاته فضلا عن غيره فإذا عجز عن حركة نفسه فكيف يتصرف في غيره فالله سبحانه وتعالى جل في العلا يخبر أن الأرواح عنده وهؤلاء الملحدون يقولون إن الأرواح مطلقة متصرفة أأنتم أعلم أم الله? To the end of it. He says, as Ibn Adam, and this is not, and the Prophet ﷺ didn't give any exception. If the son of Adam dies, all of his actions stop, except from 3. For all of that, or anything similar to that, the Prophet ﷺ has clearly indicated that his senses even stop. His hiss and his harakah, his movement and his senses stop, it's cut from the one who's dead. He says, and also likewise that their souls are being held onto, being suspended and held onto. Either, of course, we know, either they're being punished or they're being what? Or they're given pleasure or delight because of them being truly righteous. He says, and their actions also have stopped. There's no more, there's no less. Which is a clear indication that the dead does not conduct in this existence. They don't feel or know what's going on in this world. They don't know, they don't have any sense of what's taking place in this world. What's going on in people's lives. He says this shows an indication they have no type of conduct. They cannot conduct in the affairs of the creation, nor within themselves. He says, and that's the case even with themselves. They can't even do anything for themselves. He says, that how much more can they do anything for anyone else? He says, if a person now is not able to move himself, how can he conduct an existence of somewhere or an affair of someone else? For Allah Ta'ala has informed that all the souls are with him, meaning either being punished or they being what? Given delight and pleasure in the grave, of course. As we know, right? He says, for these people who are mulhidun, have deviated. They say no to the souls. He said they are released, they're free to do what they want, and they conduct. So that's what they're saying. But Ibn al-Qayyim, as we talked about, refuted this notion by saying what we just mentioned. So that's what we just want to sum up, in which you'll find, like we said, of Sun'ullah al-Hanafi mentions, and also likewise Ibn al-Qayyim. There's other speech I wanted to mention, but I wanted to get to the class because there's something I wanted to speak about today. But that is also to show how the different types of atrocities that we see take place amongst the Muslims and their belief system all around the world. You'll find that this is taking place in a lot of Muslim countries, which brings sadness and grief to the heart to see that the Muslims are easily, with all acceptance, and when their chests wide open for these type of acts. Like we said, keep in mind when a person does, indulges, or commits these type of acts, picture of the most filthiest, most sinful act that a human being could commit, for example, of adultery, or homosexuality, or killing, or murder. Shirk is worse than that. Polytheism is worse than that. Let's just say for a person killed 200 people unjustly, or 300 people. We're not justifying murder and stealing at all. That's also a major sin that Allah said He has promised that a person could be punished in the hellfire for. Nobody's justifying that. We're talking about the level of the magnitude of the sin in comparison to shirk. There's no comparison. Shirk totally outweighs that sin. Imagine a man, he committed homosexuality, let's say, for 30 men, 50 men. Which is, I'm sure everyone in this room probably says, ooh, that's pathetic and disgusting. Polytheism was worse than that. Polytheism is worse. Like I told you, killing 100 men is worse than what? Homosexuality. You've ended the life of a person. And despite of that, we know the hadith of Bukhari, what happened to him? Where did he go? Where did he go? What does it say in Bukhari? What was his abode? No. In Bukhari, hadith, like man had killed 100 men. Paradise. He had a paradise. Allah forgave him because he sought tawbah. Which is worse, killing someone, 100 people unjustly, or homosexuality? What would come to the mind? Killing someone, ended their life, khalas. Stopping their life. You ended their life. That's something tremendous. And despite of that, Allah Ta'ala still forgave it. Not to say, like we talked about, we're not justifying murder. Allah Ta'ala has made that even clear too in His book, that affair is tremendous with Allah. And what He has promised, and like we said in the hadith of Bukhari, that the angel of punishment came down to take his soul too. Which is something that I think any human being does not want to face. That the angels of punishment are arguing over the soul, that we want to take his soul. But however, may Allah protect us from that. But however, we were just making a comparison that what these so-called mashayikh or awliyas they claim, and what they're calling the Muslims too, is more erroneous and more ugly and more vilified and more disgusting than just the mere act of killing and homosexuality and stealing and murder and chaos and mass hysteria in society. The most ultimate oppression is polytheism. So that's the point we're trying to what? Trying to put in the minds of the people. Is it clear what I'm saying so far, everyone? طيب. So now if you go back to the ayat, as Allah Ta'ala says in His book, after the great Imam, Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah, as he put in the chapter, min ash-shirk an yastaghitha bi ghayrillah. From polytheism is to seek istighatha, or perform istighatha. As we talked about last lesson, we talked about the meaning of istighatha. Istighatha is what they say, talab al-ghawth, عند الشدائد or عند حصول الكروبات أو دعاء المكروب. As we talked about, the meaning of istighatha is what, everyone? It's for one to seek relief in times of severe adversity. When he's in some severe state of stress, when he's lost all hope for anything. And his only way he could turn is to Allah is to get him out of the predicament he's in. That's istighatha. طيب. The great Imam uses evidence in this in this chapter. He used the ayah which comes in the book of Allah Ta'ala, Surah Yunus. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَدْعُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَنْفَعُكَ وَلَا يُضُرُّكَ فَإِنْ فَعَلْتَ فَإِنَّكَ إِذًا لَمِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. Do not invoke besides Allah what will not benefit you nor harm you. If you do that, for verily, hence you will be from the Zalimeen, meaning the Mushrikeen. You'll be amongst those who are oppressors, and we know the dhulm here is shirk, the dhulm of shirk, the oppression of polytheism. So the oppression here, what is intended in the ayah, is the oppression of polytheism. Notice in the ayah, Allah Ta'ala says in His book, and we already discussed the two types of supplications, right everyone? We said we have dua al-ibadah, and we have dua, what everyone? We have the first type of dua, which is dua, what? Dua of what? Dua of what? What's the first category? Huh? I'm sorry, what you say, Ali? I'm sorry. What you say? Yeah, exactly. Al-mas'ala. 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 Mas'ala. Of asking. Al-mas'ala. Dua al-ibadah or dua al-mas'ala. The dua of worship itself and the dua of asking Allah. When Allah Ta'ala says in His book, Wallahu Jalla fil Ula, when He mentions it in His book, وَلَا تَدْعُوا, do not invoke. That part of the ayah is comprehensive for both types of dua. It's comprehensive for both types of dua. Dua al-ibadah and dua al-mas'ala. So notice in the ayah, Surah Yunus, it says, do not invoke besides Allah, meaning dua al-ibadah and dua whatever you want. Alhamdulillah. Yahdikum Allahu wa yuslihu balakum. Do not invoke besides Allah what will not benefit you and what will not harm you. When Allah Ta'ala mentions do not invoke beside you what will not benefit you nor harm you, this is what I want to discuss today. I wanted to teach everyone a principle on what they call an usul al-fiqh. Oh, I just had it. SubhanAllah. What did I do with it? What is the matter in usul al-fiqh? What they call it, sifatun kashifa. La mafhuma laha. Let me just get it. I got all these things open. Notice in the ayah, if you notice everyone, here it is, alhamdulillah, I found it. Notice in the ayah, it's called what? Notice in the ayah that says, do not invoke besides Allah what will not benefit you nor harm you. That part in the ayah, what will not benefit you nor harm you. What if a person who had a called fahmun saqim, that had a sick understanding, and shaitan wanted to put in his mind something, either due to his ignorance, or due to some type of following his desires. Or due to him following his desires, he could understand the ayah. Tayyib. Allah only mentioned that I can only invoke, do not invoke besides what will not benefit me or nor harm me. But I invoked Jesus, the son of Mary, and it benefited me, and it brought me some benefit, and it removed some type of harm. Based upon this understanding. This type of clarification, and I'm going to bring other examples, don't worry, it's going to come. This is called sifatun kashifa. And there's a lot of these examples in the Quran. And in the Sunnah too. What's wrong? It's time to call you there? Okay, focus. Just focus. طيب. This is called sifatun kashifa. Sifatun kashifa, and I have to teach this. It's called sifatun kashifa, meaning there's a wording that's brought in the ayat in the book of Allah that تفضل. He's calling you there. He came to call you there. Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. لا حول ولا قوة. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. الله أكبر الله. اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آتي محمد الوسيلة الفضيلة وبعث المقام طيب, if you go back to the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa jalla fil ula that he mentions, it says, do not invoke besides Allah what does not benefit you nor harm you. Is this a condition of ibadah of other than Allah, that one has to find that in order to worship Allah or other than Allah, that they will use this ayah to say, well, Allah only mentioned here that if it doesn't benefit me or if it doesn't harm me. So that if that's there, if these two characteristics are present in what I'm worshiping, then that justifies for me to worship it. Then that's okay for me to worship it. Is that clear? Is that what's understood from the ayah? You understand where I'm coming from now? So just listen. Some of the words, don't write this down. I want everyone to understand first, because this is important. This one needs understanding before you start writing. Some of the words in the Quran, they come restricting a specific description. Just restricting a specific description. Meaning there's no opposite meaning that opposes that. Don't worry, I'm going to explain it. Once I say it and I get the example, everyone's going to be like, oh, I understand. Lazimun laha, meaning there's no lawazim. there's no meaning that will be understood as the contradictory type of meaning. Just listen. Rather, this type of wording that's mentioned in the ayat to the book of Allah just came to agree with the state of affairs, or the reality was taking place, to put emphasis on it and to give it a little bit more emphasis and for more clarification. This type of wording in the Quran is called as-sifatul kashifa. Don't write this down. As-sifatul kashifa. What is as-sifatul kashifa? لا مفهوم لها يعني ليس هناك مخالفة المفهوم. Listen. لا مفهوم لها meaning that there's no meaning that's contradictory to what you will understand based upon what you read in the ayah. Don't worry, I'm going to give an example. Once I mention it, everybody's going to understand. This is from those affairs of usul. It's the usuliyin, that's what they call it. He said there's some ayat in the book of Allah that when it comes, the way it's related, of course, in certain contexts, when it's restricted, that characteristic, what will come as a result of it is taken away the understanding that's in opposition to it. Don't worry, everybody's probably saying, what is he talking about? Don't worry. Some of the ayats in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala contain this type. For example, I'm just going to give an example right now. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in another ayah in his book, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ كَانُوا يَكْفُرُونَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ وَيَقْتُلُونَ النَّبِيِّينَ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ. And I want everyone to focus on this. Listen to what I'm saying. He says that is because they disbelieved in the ayat of Allah and they killed the Prophet without any justifiable right. The focus in the ayat is on the last part. They killed the prophets without any justifiable right. A person now who's so-called well-versed with a sick mind will think, so that what that meaning necessitates is that there were some prophets that were killed justifiably. Is it clear what I'm saying so far? I'll say it again. Listen to that end part of the ayat. That is because they disbelieved in the ayat of Allah. And they killed the prophets without any justifiable reason or justifiable right. A person right now thinking, he says, there must be an opposite meaning. Right? There must be something that necessitates the opposite of that. Meaning, Allah mentioned بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ, unjustifiably. So that means there had to have been prophets that were killed who were what? That was what? Do right. Justifiable. Is it clear what I'm saying so far? So just listen. This is the reason why I'm studying this. Because when you study this and you read these ayats, you have to know how to properly apply these meanings. I have to go into this. Because it's very important. Because when you read these ayats, you'll know what and how to properly understand it. That's when they say these type of phrases that you'll find, I'm not going to say phrases, but wording in the ayat of the book of Allah, it's called sifatun kashifa. Meaning there's no mafhum al-mukhalafa. There's no meaning that will come as the opposite of what you would think when you see the ayah. There's no opposite opposing meaning to that. Rather, when Allah said بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ, unjustifiably, that was only put for emphasis. Not to take the understanding that there was prophets that was killed for do right. Is it clear what I'm saying so far? Al-Faras? I'm glad that was. Oh, I like that one. Hey, so listen, I'm just tired. I'm just happy to be here. Huh? Don't worry, I'm all right. Sifatun kashifa. Kashifa, like our brother Kashif. Kashifa. I'm going to give more examples. Don't worry. So is it clear so far when I'm saying certain people it's clear so far? So far, so good? So far, so good? All right, I'm going to give more examples. Don't worry. Fine. Even the great Imam, Muhammad Amin al-Shinqiti, not Mukhtar al-Shinqiti, Amin. Muhammad Amin, the great Imam. Muhammad Amin al-Shinqiti, not Mukhtar al-Shinqiti, not the Sufi. Muhammad Amin al-Shinqiti, Sahib al-Adwa al-Bayan, the great Imam. He says, وَقَدْ يَقُولُ قَائِلٌ, for a person that we just said, we just gave an example. A person can say, killing the prophets unjustifiably. He said, prophets killing any prophet is all oppression, is false, just reject it, it's not permissible. That's the reason why he said, that's the reason why this type of phrase or this wording in the ayah, comes for clarification of the reality, to put emphasis. Because there's no justifiable killing of any prophet. Is it clear what I'm saying so far? He says, killing of all prophets are unjustifiable, it's all oppression, and it's all considered tremendous with Allah, of course. Another example of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his book, يَتَكَبَّرُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ. That Allah, or that is because, he's talking about people who are arrogant. They were arrogant in the earth unjustifiably, without any due right. That's another example. Is there such thing as justifiable arrogance? Or correct arrogance? Does it exist? So in this ayah it says that's because they were arrogant in the earth, or they ran about arrogant in the earth with unjustifiably or without due right. The word بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ, without due right, that's what you call sifatun kashifa. There's no mafhum, there's no understanding of what opposes that, of what you would extract to think. To say, whoa, so then you mean to tell me there's justifiable arrogance? Because a person would think in their mind, they was arrogant in the earth unjustifiably. So that means that there's justifiable arrogance. That mafhum, that understanding is not extracted from the ayah. That was only mentioned unjustifiably or without due right, only to what? To clarify the state of affairs or the reality, to put more emphasis and clarification. No more, no less. Is it clear so far what I'm saying? So far so good? That's called sifatun kashifa. There's no mafhum. What do you mean mafhum? No understanding. Mafhum al-mukhalafa. There's no mafhum al-mukhalafa. Meaning of what you would extract from the opposite meaning of the ayah. Is it clear so far what I'm saying? Like we said, there's no one that can go about on the earth arrogant justifiably or with due right. That doesn't exist, because all arrogance is unlawful. Another example of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his book, وَمَن يَدْعُ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ لَا بُرْهَانَ لَهُ بِهِ فَإِنَّمَا حِسَابُهُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِ. Allah ta'ala also says in his book, that is because they invoked along with Allah another deity. Excuse me, I'm sorry everyone, I'm sorry. Whoever invokes along with Allah another deity, he has no evidence for it. For verily his reckoning will be with his Lord. What's the point of what I'm mentioning here in the ayah? He has no evidence for it. There might be people out there that would claim that they have some evidence to why they what? Are worshiping the other deity. Well, I have the evidence. Here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his book, La burhana lahu bihi, that type of form of wording is called sifatun kashifa. It's to put emphasis on it. Not to say that if you had evidence now, it justifies for you to what? Worship other than Allah. So he says, فَهَذِهِ صِفَةٌ لَازِمَةٌ أو قَيْدٌ لازم فكل الشرك لا برهان لصاحبه به ولا حجة له عليه بل يستحيل وجود برهان على عبادة إله آخر مع الله. He said this is a sifa, a type of characteristic, of course, that we said, of clarification. That's restricting it. Because all polytheism, there's no true evidence for the person doing it. There's no argument or no justifiable causes or any argument or any type of proofs or evidences that supports what he's upon. Another example he said of this ayah, or what this type of what we're speaking about called sifatun kashifa, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his book, verily your Lord has made unlawful, abominable acts with the private part, what is done openly and secret, and ithm, bighayr al-haq, and also sin, and also oppression, without due right. And to set up partners with Allah, He did not send any authority down. That He did not send any authority with. And that you say upon Allah which you have no knowledge of. There's two types of sifatun kashifa in this ayah. One of them is when Allah says He has made unlawful abominable acts, which is done with the private part, which is done openly and secretly, and sin, and injustice or oppression without due right. That's one example. Oppression and injustice without due right. Right? And that you set up partners with Allah where He sent no authority down. That's another example. The one which is, we will start off with, as he mentions, it says, even Sheikh Muhammad Amin al-Shinqiti, he said, فَفِي هَا الْآيَةِ الْكَرِيمَةِ وَصْفَانْ كَاشِفَانَ الْأَوَّلِ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ. So when Allah says oppression without due right, what's that called again? Sifatun kashifa. It has no mafhum. So when you say no mafhum, no understanding to it, what does He mean no understanding to it? Mean the opposite of what it would necessitate. Because I know a lot of students, even when I was in university, they didn't understand this qa'idah. They said, no mafhum. How you can say ayah doesn't have no mafhum? It has no understanding. What do you mean by that? What it means is what's the opposite of what's extracted of the opposite meaning. That's what's intended. Meaning it has that mafhum is not applicable here in this ayah. Meaning what you would think. So do you mean to tell me there's oppression that is in due right? No, that's not the meaning of the ayah. فليس هناك بغير الحق فكل بغي إنما هو بالباطل. والثاني قوله تعالى ما لم ينزل به السلطان. فهذه صفة كاشفة أخرى. When Allah did not send down any authority. This is another example of صفة كاشفة. He says, hence there is no shirk, no polytheism, where Allah Ta'ala sent down authority. Is it clear what I'm saying so far? He says, just as Allah Ta'ala says in His book, He says, أَمْ أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ سُلْطَانًا فَهُوَ يَتَكَلَّمُ بِمَا كَانُوا بِهِ يُشْرِكُونَ. Because there's another ayah where Allah says in His book, He says, or did we send down upon them some type of authority in which which Allah had revealed, or what Allah has said to them, in which they, as a result of it, they can set up or justify them setting up partners with Him in His worship. So this type of mafhum, or this type of understanding, is not extracted from these ayat. The opposite of what you would think. That type of mafhum is غير وارد, meaning mafhum al-mukhalafa, meaning the opposing understanding that's extracted from the ayah. For verily that is not understood from the ayat. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? This is the reason why we teach people this type of what? This type of ilm. Because if a person reads the Quran and they think that, then even if, let's just say, because people, alhamdulillah, are of different understandings, and different intelligence, at different levels. They read the Quran, they would think that killed the prophets without justifiable reasons? That must mean that there were prophets that were killed justifiably. You see how that ignorance will run or throw a person in the pit of what? Of misguidance. In the pit of something dangerous. To have that type of belief walking around in your mind? Or for example, that there's justifiable oppression, or there's justifiable arrogance, or there's permissible arrogance, or there's permissible killing of prophets. This is the reason why I'm taking the time to what? To teach this type of usul from the usul. And this is a fair qaida usuliyah. Because there's some people out there that said that we don't know no usul al-fiqh. There's people out there that says that about us. The students of knowledge they don't have no knowledge of usul al-fiqh. They don't have any knowledge. I know for certain. Like, okay, you know for knowledge, everybody's level, or who they study with, and all the students of knowledge, or what was their level, or who they study with, and books they finished. I guess you have ihata, total encompassment of all the students of knowledge, and what they study, and what books they study, and who they studied it with. For you to sit at a lecture and say, they know no knowledge of usul al-fiqh. I know they don't. Okay. Right now, I'm teaching you a qaida usuliyah. Probably if he heard it, he probably wouldn't understand it. No problem. But at any rate, there's another. Now, I'm going to stop here. We can pray. But, just to throw a curveball, because there are some ayats where this is applicable. And I'll leave it there. So you'll have everyone let that paint dry in your head and keep that. But there are some ayats, not these type of ayats. As you'll find the great Imam Muhammad Amin al-Shinqiti, he gives to tell you, to show you the difference. He'll give the key way or the actual way that one can distinguish in another lesson which will continue. But keep that in your mind. For these type of ayats and these type of contexts, that if you look at your book, Kitaab At-Tawheed, again, if you look into it, that part or that context or that wording, what does it say? Do not invoke besides Allah what does not benefit you nor harm you. That's called sifatun kashifa, la mafhuma laha. Meaning, there's no mafhum al-mukhalafa. There's no mafhum al-mukhalafa. There's no opposing meaning that's extracted from the ayah. Meaning that if that thing benefits me, or if it removes some type of harm from me, then I can worship it. Because that does take place. Now, Allah Ta'ala does allow for people who's upon polytheism to make them think that their deities that they're worshiping along with Allah answered them. As a fitna for them and a trial for them. So a person who worships Jesus, the son of Mary, you'll find that Christians do say this. I invoke Jesus, my life changed for the better. You can't tell me nothing, brother. You understand? What is your proof against that? Your proof against that comes in the book of Allah. Tabarak wa ta'ala. As Allah Tabarak wa ta'ala says in his book, he says, وَذَرْنِي وَمَنْ يُكَذِّبُ بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ سَنَسْتَدْرِجُهُم مِّنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ وَأُمْلِي لَهُمْ إِنَّ كَيْدِي مَتِينٌ إِنَّ كَيْدِي مَتِينٌ. Allah Tabarak wa ta'ala says in his book, leave me with those who belie this hadith. We'll set them up with a trap where they do not perceive. And I'll give them what they want. I mean, I'll give them an answer they do. I ask them and give them what they want, what they ask for. Verily, my plot is strong. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when people invoke other than Allah, and they find and they say, oh, my deities are what I invoke besides Allah, answer my dua. That's because in reality, Allah answered the dua. Was it the deities? Or it wasn't Jesus, the son of Mary? It was Allah himself. But in order to keep them going deep in their misguidance, he answered their dua to make them think that that particular thing that they was invoking along with Allah answered it so they could continue in their misguidance. To trick them and fool them as a what? A test for them and a fitna for them and a trial for them. So in actuality still, none of them what? Answered them. These deities didn't answer them. It was Allah. But however, like we said, this type of wording here is only brought for emphasis and only brought for what? What's the actual state of affair or what is the reality? No more, no less. Hence, it's not permissible to say, well, I experienced that this benefited me and I experienced that this removed some type of harm from me, that I can make dua to it. And we say that this type of wording in the Quran, ya akhi, is called sifatun kashifa. There's no mafhum to it. Is it clear what I'm saying? Gee, we'll stop here. There's more details. There's more details. I said, see how Shaitan slipped your lip? Details. I said deities. Details. But can you continue that next class? Because we got to stop praying. Any questions about the class? The Frazi told me he was tired and chilling. You're right. I'm just going to let you finish your question. The frost. Number one, generally speaking, of course we know minor polytheism breaks down and you have what is major, you have minor. You can't put them all at the same level. You can't say all sins are shirk and just leave it generally like that. You have to break it down. What type of shirk? Major polytheism or minor polytheism? Or minor. So we can't put it all in one box. So there's every sin is polytheism. So a person that doesn't have proper understanding, they'll think, well, so any sin that I commit This major polytheism removes and nullifies my Islam. No, it isn't. That's not the case. Because that's dangerous. Major polytheism, of course. I was about to get to that. That's the understanding, of course, of the Khawarij. They say all sins nullify Islam. So the Khawarij believe that any sin that a person commits has nullified and removed them out of the fold of Islam. So we don't believe that. Ahlul Sunnah with Salafiyin, that people are traverse the correct path, don't believe that every sin is major polytheism. Jayyid? That's number one. However, sins also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself say that sins break down to two types. Allah himself categorized sins in his book. إن تجتنبوا كبائر ما تنهون عنه نكفر عنكم سيئاتكم وندخلكم جنة وندخلكم مدخلا كريما. That's one ayah. Another ayah is Surah Al-Najm. He says, إن تجتنبوا كبائر إثم إلا اللمم إن ربك واسع المغفرة. So Allah himself breaks down sins into two types. Allah himself. In two ayats. He says, if you stay away from the major sins, the kaba'ira ma tunhawna an, nukaffir ankum sayyatikum. So notice Allah called it kaba'ir. If you stay away from the major sins and what we have prohibited, we will remit from you the what? Minor ones. A person will say, well, does it say minor in the ayat? That's because there's another ayat where Allah says in Surah An-Najm, where He says, إن تجتنبوا كبائر الإثم والفواحش إلا اللمم. If you stay away from the major sins and abominable acts, which is done with the private parts, except the lamam. If you go back to the tafsir, Ibn Abbas said the lamam is the minor or the smaller minor sins. Except the lamam. So based upon that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has broken sins into what? Major and what? Minor. So Allah himself has done it. Khalas. Once Allah has laid it down, done. Right? طيب. Generally, you'll find that Ahl Ilm do mention and say in regards to sins, generally, it's a type of shirk. Type. Not major shirk. It's a type. Meaning, whereas you give precedence to your desires over what Allah has what? Commanded. But it's not the shirk that removes you from the fold of Islam at all. It's a type that renders your faith incomplete. Renders your faith incomplete. But with what we say that Ahl Ilm, majority of them mention and say that sins does not nullify your Islam. But we do say that sins is dangerous upon your iman, it's dangerous upon your faith, and it's dangerous upon it being what they call baridatul kufr. Baridatul kufr. Meaning it could lead you down the road of kufr if you're not careful. They say dhunub is baridatul kufr with shirk. It could take you down the road with shirk and kufr. Because it can now cloud your judgment to the point where you start, especially if you start thinking what you do is halal, then that's when you nullified it. Is it clear what I'm saying? But however, like we said, generally, you cannot classify all sins as being major. No. That's from the ideologies of the Khawarij. You can't say that. That's a dangerous. I'm not saying you believe that for us. But I'm just saying that generally, that is dangerous. We don't say that all sins is major shirk. Is it clear what I'm saying? Not all. Don't stay away from the word all. Certain. Say certain or certain types of sins. Try to not use the word all. You say all, you're making it generalized for every sin. Say there's certain types of sins that are major, and there's certain types of sins that are considered minor. And there's certain types of sins that are considered major, and there's certain types of sins that are considered minor sins. That type of word. Well, don't say all. Any other questions? Any questions from anyone? So we could pray. It's getting late. No, go ahead, Jamal. You can't wait. You wanted to know real bad. They are. They're ayats. For example, I'll give you one example. That's it, and it will stop. One ayah. Allah says in this book, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا وفي رواية وفي آية وفي قراءة فتثبتوا أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم إيش نادمين. O you who believe, if a fasiq comes to you with some news, verify it. Here it's permissible to take the opposing meaning of it now. Exactly. If a righteous person who's reliable and upright comes to you with some news, you don't need to verify it. You get it? Exactly. But here we apply what opposes what we've been talking about. Right or wrong? That's called mafhum al-mukhalafa. It's the next class. It's the thing. So you opened up a door that I didn't want to open up yet.